Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. Claire Waite Brown is the founder of the Creativity Found podcast and website. She says she had to kiss a lot of networking frogs before she found the right sort of groups for her. She now runs her own networking group, which is full of creative people. Thank you very much for being my guest on the podcast today, Claire.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Liz.
Now, your business is all about helping adults to be creative. Have you always been a creative person yourself? What were you like at school?
My thing was always dance, and I still love dance, and I still get to do it now. But I did have a bit of had my own kind of creativity found story where that wasn't a part of my life. But I was also like a lot of people I speak to in my work with Creativity Found say that because I couldn't draw, I assumed I wasn't creative, and that's definitely me. Pen to paper, pencil on paper, like two-dimensional, I would always shy away from. So you kind of, think that means you're not creative. But like I say, I was lucky enough to continue with my dance. I did dance at university. It was very, very modern in their days. I would have liked to have done, musical theatre style stuff, but yeah. I had to do a degree because I was bright enough to do a degree, so I had to do a degree. So I managed to find a course that involved dance, but the way it did it was to be very modern. It was contemporary dance. It was new choreography. It was all about pushing the boundaries and creating new things, which I did enjoy. But towards the end of that, I thought to myself, look, you're not going to be able to earn money from this, Claire. So what's your second favourite thing after dance? And my second favourite thing after dance was books. So I pushed myself to go into publishing, and I had thought I wanted to be, literature, high fiction, and I ended up working in illustrated non-fiction books, which is absolutely brilliant and way more creative than fiction would have been. So kind of surreptitiously and a roundabouty way, there have been creative things going on in my life, but possibly without me really realising it. I didn't really realise it until I actually started the Creativity Found podcast and started talking to other people about their stories. And then I was like, oh, hello, Claire, you've got your own story here.
So you went into publishing and you worked for an employer to start with, didn't you? But then you became freelance at some point, is that right?
Yeah, so I went to Faber and Faber. This was in the days where you could just send your CV, blank it out to everybody and, hope for the best. And I was in the right place at the right time. I got temporary work with Faber and Faber in their sales department, the least place I wanted to be, but you take it. Yeah. And then I ended up working there for 3 years. So that was a really good background for me. I then decided to send out my CV to everywhere again and ended up at Collins & Brown, which was illustrated non-fiction publisher. So I was in-house with them for a number of years. And once you've done that, it makes it much easier to go freelance. So I was living in Oxford then. I'd moved out from having lived in London because my flatmates left me. So I was living in Oxfordshire and had built up enough of experience, reputation to be able to go freelance. And so I have been freelance in that field ever since. And from, getting work, it's a case of you don't really have to try too hard if you're good at what you do. Because word gets around, and that was how I would get freelance work. People would recommend me, basically.
And so tell me about the kind of books that you still edit now.
Oh, they're super duper. So it's in all sorts of topics. So when I started in the mid to late 90s, Changing Rooms was the TV show, and paint effects were massive. So I worked with Annie Sloan on loads and loads of her books on decorative paint effects and gilding. So that was really, really big. And over the years, I've seen things move around a bit. But for example, this week I have got work on a book about drawing in the Kaiwai style. I've done a number in that series. I've done a number of Mind, Body, Spirit titles. I've just done a complete guide to crochet with Jane Crowfoot, drawing flowers with a lovely lady in Italy called Bianca Girola, and some textile ones, all sorts. But they're step by step teaching you how to do this craft, how to learn it. And that means that my job involves making sure the text and the images are really clear and they take you through a consistent journey that someone who has never done this before can start doing it. But also it looks gorgeous. There are some lovely projects. Look at what you can make when you've practiced a bit more, things like that. So it is very creative in the actual process of making the books, which is lovely.
Yeah, it sounds lovely. So tell me about the Creativity Found podcast. How did that start and who is it for?
Yeah, it started in a very roundabout way, as so many things I've realised have done. I went through a period of really horrible anxiety, and I was seeing a counsellor, and one of the sessions she showed me this wheel of life where you have a graphic and it's like a circle with pieces of pie, and those pieces of pie represent aspects of your life, for example, family, friends, finances. And I didn't mean for those all to be Fs, but the one that I had a hole in was fun. Put another F in there. Basically, I could see that there was nothing in my piece of pie that was just for me, escapism, enjoyment, didn't have some kind of other value put upon it by an external force. Now, so I started looking for an activity to do, and higgledy-piggledy, I couldn't find what I wanted to do. So I ended up organising it myself, and I started a new business. So completely not what I should have been doing. Hosting drama and singing classes for adults. So that was the kind of escapism that I wanted. And for 2 hours a week, you'd go to this class. It would be taught by local professional actors and vocal coaches. And we would just have an absolute laugh. And it's like going to drama school, but without having to go to drama school. Yeah. It's like doing the rehearsals without having to actually put on the show. And that was the aim of it, really. You don't have any of those extra pressures of putting on a show. I don't know, club politics, things like that. So anyway, obviously COVID happened, boom, we know this. And I had, through doing those classes and actually through going to networking events to promote those classes, I was meeting people who were saying, yeah, I used to love doing such and such an artistic activity, but then I stopped because I was at work or the family or societal pressure or whatever. So that's where I got the idea to actually put those stories into a podcast. It was lockdown. I could do it remotely. I knew people with those stories. That's where I could start. And it grew and grew and grew. And it came out originally, it was meant to be something to keep the fires, the embers burning while Open Stage Arts was on hold, to keep that kind of marketing up. But it grew into its own thing that was much, much bigger and gave me so much pleasure that I continued with that, and it developed and grew into its own beast. And what has become apparent is that there are lots of people who stopped doing a creative thing they loved and then started again later in life. So it's all about the benefits that they get from it. So I wasn't really thinking about my audience. I mean, every podcaster will tell you to think about your audience, but I wasn't. I was just doing what I wanted to do. But I do now. And I know that for my audience, if they want to hear stories because they are thinking, I'd like to try something, we are there on that show to say, you can try it. This person has done it. We say a lot of the time, you might be rubbish. You might think you're rubbish. It really doesn't matter. We say, you might try that and not like it. Also doesn't matter. Go try something else. So all the time we've got these themes and stories that help a listener to think, I could try that. But also they are very, very interesting life stories from my guests, which it's an absolute pleasure to be able to share.
Yeah. And on the back of the podcast, you then started the Creativity Found website. So what can people find on there?
Yeah, so that was my next step. So I was listening to my listeners again this time around. I was thinking about them, but thinking about that next step. So if you have listened to the show and you think, I want to try something, I want to try printmaking or pottery. So that's why I started the website, to put on there people that I trust that teach their art or craft, or that provide kits, or that provide online courses, put them on the website so that people know they can go there and look for an activity to try for themselves. So that's the idea of the website. Anybody can go and have a look, try something. And you may be confident, you may want the social aspect of going to a workshop, but you may not want that to begin with. You may want to try something at home before you go to a workshop. So there are all of those offerings on the website. And the people that I host on that website are my friends, and they're my friends now, members of a promotional and networking membership. So it's called the Creativity Found Collective. And so as well as having that on the website, we get together for meetups online. Some of us go out to arty crafty things in real life when we can as well. And there's just that extra support of a community of creative teachers. And also recently, I wanted to help the creative teachers to be able to outsource a bit, because you tend to think, when I'm starting a business out of my creative passion, I need to do everything, all the marketing, all the SEO, do everything. And I want to help those artists and crafters do more of the arty and the craftying by affordably, comfortably outsourcing a little bit of that business element to someone else who is better at it, because they know how to do it. Ultimately, that'll give you more time, and it doesn't have to be as expensive as, you might worry that it is. So that's the whole umbrella that Creativity Found has grown into.
Do you think that sort of underneath that we're all creative?
Yes. I mean, it's because, and I talk about this a lot as well, and I get very narky about labels, and everything turns into labels now. My husband asked me about some food I was eating. He said, "Is that your breakfast or your lunch?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Stop trying to label my food." And yes, I think we've talked a lot about what the word creative means. And in essence, it means you create a thing or you create a solution. But also, the creative thing that you create doesn't have to be the most important thing about the creative process. Yeah. The actual doing it can be the most enjoyable element. And with my choreography that I had to do at uni, that was creative. That was creating a new thing, putting old things together to create a new thing. So, and that comes into scientific discoveries, chefs, everywhere people are solving problems, and that is a creative process. And I've spoken to a number of engineers and scientists on the show who originally were led down the path of, because you like this side of your education, that's the only side you have. And the creative side is then completely pushed to the side, don't do any of that. When really they intertwine beautifully, and you can do both, and you can usually get a lot of pleasure. You usually are a scientist that also loves creating collages, or an engineer that loves weaving. I mean, you can see how they all connect. So yes, and as I said at the beginning, that idea that you're only creative if you can draw is so outdated, and yet still so prevalent, which is very sad.
Yeah. Well, I think children are encouraged to be creative in schools, aren't they? And then it all kind of stops in secondary school. What is it that brings people back to wanting to be creative again?
There are so many experiences, and often it can be quite a not very nice experience that kind of makes you look at your life. So I mentioned at the beginning of this episode about my anxiety, which made me look at my whole environment in quite a different way and what I was doing in a different way. For other people, it can be health scares, it can be burnout, stress, traumatic experiences, things like that, which is a shame that it can be such a big pivotal moment that makes you change. For others, it is a slow trickling, a kind of background thinking, there's something not right here, I'm missing something. So it does tend to start in a little bit of a unhappy place, but always ends up with a happy ending. At least I know I've got that on the podcast. You know, there's always a happy ending to it.
What kind of changes have you seen happen in people's lives because they've come back to doing something creative?
Oh, remarkable things. I think a lot of it, there is a lot of confidence. So it's not always just the thing, as we spoke about, what is creativity, the thing that you make. It's how it relates to the whole of the rest of your life. So confidence has been a really big thing that comes through. And people are saying, I'm doing something that I never imagined I would do. It's the same for me. I am doing something that I never even wanted to do, and I started it, and it's like, I love it. And that is what is coming from people. It's that confidence, social aspect. I'm big on the social aspect. When I had my anxiety and my realisation, I realised that I had been quite lonely despite having a wonderful family and, a wonderful home life. I was missing social interaction with other people. So there are usually very many wider aspects of returning or even finding a new, completely new creative activity, how that feeds into the rest of your life and benefits all other aspects of it. I'm not sure if I answered the right question, if I just invented my own question that I answered there.
It's all good. It's all creative.
Exactly.
Now, you've already mentioned networking a little while ago, but tell me a bit more about the collective that you've brought together and what kinds of businesses are part of that and how you support each other.
Yeah, I mean, I had this experience. If I do say so myself, I am a very good networker. I went to Florida in January just to go to a podcast conference to meet people I'd never met before. I know. It's brilliant. I loved it. This, again, is something I never realised I would enjoy. And I started going to networking meetings in my local area to promote open stage arts. And I was petrified. I mean, I'd heard stories from other people about hideous breakfast meetings. And to be fair, I did have to kiss a few frogs before I found my right group. So I went to some really horrible networking things. And then I found the ones that suited me.
Yeah.
And I've stuck with them ever since, which is brilliant. So they're local ones that I was going to in real life. And I wanted other people to not have that feeling that I had, that networking is horrible and like business cardy and a bit cringy. I wanted people to know that networking is not necessarily you going there to sell a thing, but meeting other people that are maybe in a similar situation to you. Certainly that happens with our online meetups. We do monthly online meetups, and sometimes we'll have a guest speaker in. If one of my members has said, I'm a bit confused about such and such a topic, I'll go find someone who can talk to us all about it. Sometimes it's just us. We get together and have a chat about whatever we need to chat about at that particular time. One time last year, I was feeling a bit rubbish. And we had got together, and it turned out some of the other members were feeling a little bit rubbish, and we were able to talk about why and what we could do about it. So I want to make... now, this sounds like a sweeping generalisation, but I have heard it from my members and others that quite often people in arts and crafts businesses do feel a bit icky about pushing themselves, marketing, selling, networking. So this is definitely a good group to start with, because you are with like-minded people. You can go onto my website, you can see who all the members are and what they offer, so you know what you're coming into. it's been really important for me and for our other members to be able to get together, because we're all over the country and we're all solopreneurs, as you say. So you can often feel a bit like you're the only one.
Yes.
And then we get together and, oh, I'm not the only one. Oh, that's nice. Sorry you're feeling rubbish, but we'll make each other feel better. So it's kind of an entry point. It's an entry point, safe networking for arty, crafty people and others. But we've made some really great relationships. There's been some lovely collaborations come about just in the last couple of years that creativityfound.co.uk has been running. So there's that as well, getting together with people and, moving your business along.
Sounds fantastic, Claire. Well, I will be putting the link to your website in the show notes so people can find you. Is there anywhere else you would like people to get in touch with you? Social media, anything like that?
Yeah, on the social media, on Instagram and Facebook, I am at Creativity Found Podcast. Instagram is my favourite one. I share all sorts on there about the members, about myself, about the collective, what we're doing, about the podcast. You can look for the podcast, obviously, on any podcast app. It's called Creativity Found. And I also have a YouTube channel, Creativity Found Podcast, where I post a bit about the members. We've been doing some lives recently, so you can find out more about the members. And also I do some highlights from the podcast and things like that. So there's some extra things over on YouTube as well. But basically, Creativity Found, that'll find me.
We'll find you. Lovely. Well, thank you ever so much for being my guest, Claire. I really enjoyed our conversation. And best of luck with your collective and all that you're doing.
Thank you so much. It's been a brilliant chat, and I'm so pleased to be able to talk about networking because it's brought so much to my life that, it's just changed everything. So it's lovely to be on a podcast that talks about networking and how cool it is.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.